Hi, my name is Angelica Cabel. I am doing an oral report for Dr. Hyder's senior seminar course, Freedom of Expression, the Descent of Hate and Heresy. This report is based off the last paper I wrote entitled Palmer Raids, a Violation of Due Process Law. In 1917, a nationwide crisis had developed in Russia affecting social, economic, and political relations. As the country faced the threat of financial bankruptcy, the national gross production plummeted. Businesses were closed down, resulting in mass unemployment and decreased wages for those who were still working. Yet, the cost of living increased tremendously. By November 1917, Vladimir Lenin, leader of the Bolshevik Revolution, was determined to overthrow the provisional government of Alexander Kerensky and succeeded giving power to the local Soviets, who were dominated by Bolsheviks. America's first experience of what was thought of as Bolshevik Revolution occurred when a Seattle mayor received a package marked Gimbel Brothers, which is a department store at that time. When the package was opened, vials of sulfuric acid spilled out. Fortunately, the acid did not fall on the package's 3 dynamite caps, so it didn't explode. The next day, the former senator of Georgia received a similar package. The maid who opened it was not as fortunate, for she walked away with both of her hands blown off. After a few days, postal authorities were able to track down 34 more virtually identical mail bombs. According to Watson, 16 of which were sitting in Manhattan post offices due to insufficient funds, while others who reached their destinations were fortunately intercepted before they could be opened. Recipients of the packages consisted of prominent leaders in government and businesses, those of which included John D. Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, and Supreme Court Justice Oliver Holmes. Communism was not the only concern of Americans at that time. The economy began to decline due to the end of the war. The soldiers who were returning from the military were looking for unemployment, yet their hunt was not successful. Also, with no use of military equipment at that time, munitions production was cut, further eliminating more jobs. Nonetheless, the cost of living for the average family increased. While wages remained the same, some had to face layoffs due to the end of the wartime profits. During 1919, about 4 million workers partook in 3,600 strikes seeking shorter hours and higher pay. But somehow their demands were interpreted to be of Soviet revolution. The right-wing press accused communists of strikes as well as the race riots that were occurring in Washington, D.C., and Chicago, and other cities that were across the country. There were 2 main union/socialist groups at that time, one of which was the International Workers of the World, also known as the Wobblies. They were centered in the Northwest, and they were led by Bill Haywood. Another party was the Socialist Party, which was led by Eugene Debs. The Wall Street Journal presumed that the unions were under the control of the Wobblies and Russian Bolsheviks. So this gave rise to a heightened American patriotism and what is also known as the Red Scare. On May 6, 1919, a man was shot 3 times by a sailor for refusing to stand for the Star-Spangled Banner, and surprisingly enough, he received applause from the audience. According to Burnett, anyone who wasn't patriotic as possible, which included conscientious objectors, draft dodgers, slackers, German Americans, immigrants, and communists, were all suspect. On June 2, 1919, anarchist Carlo Valdinoci placed a bomb at the home of Attorney General Alexander Mitchell Palmer in Washington, D.C. It was one of the many of the coordinated attacks that day on judges, politicians, and law enforcement officials in 8 cities throughout the country. In August 1919, Palmer organized the Justice Department's General Intelligence Division. Its mission was to hunt down, arrest, and deport radicals, immigrants, aliens, and left-wing groups suspected of any communist actions. Palmer appointed J. Edgar Hoover as head of the Justice Department. With help from the FBI and other agencies, Hoover was able to collect data that identified violent anarchists. He was also able to compile an estimated 10,000 communists, which somehow increased to 200,000 suspected individuals and organizations. On Armistice Day, 2 months after the bombings in August, a mob of veterans marched past a Wobbly Hall in Centralia, Washington, where Wobblies opened fire. Both parties broke out fighting, resulting in 4 veteran casualties. In reaction, the mob hauled Wobbly out of his jail cell, then hung him from a bridge where they shot him several times. In the West Coast, angered by the mobs, American citizens joined together and began beating innocent labor leaders eager to eliminate assumed Bolsheviks. With President Woodrow Wilson ill, Palmer was left in charge to take action against the Bolsheviks and communists. Under passed laws such as the Sedition Act, suspected radicals and foreigners identified by Hoover's department were arrested. Congress also passed the Deportation Act of 1918. It authorized the deportation of any alien who 1. Opposed all organized government, 2. Advocated the overthrow of the government by force or violence, and 3. Belonged to any organization teaching such views. Local and state legislature also passed ordinances against radical activity. 32 states made it illegal to display the red flag of communism. On November 7, 1919, Hoover ordered his agents in 12 cities to detain radicals, with the main target being the Russian People's House in New York, where 200 men and women were arrested, in spite of only having 27 arrest warrants at the time. Others were dragged from their homes without any formal charges, and American citizens were released immediately, seeing that they couldn't be deported. However, those who weren't associated with any radical organization still were held without trial or access to counsel. The raids produced 249 deportees who were shipped back to to Russia on December 21, 1919, on an old troop ship, the Buford, also known as the Soviet Ark, a name coined by the press. The Justice Department enacted the planned raids in 33 cities, arresting around 6,000 to 10,000 people. Some of the arrests were made due to individuals who were subscribed to left-wing newspapers, read Russian novels, or even ate in ethnic restaurants. Again, arrest warrants weren't issued at the time of the arrests. Instead, they were issued after individuals were in custody. The raiders confiscated political literature, membership cards, organization records, and other papers, frequently without search warrants. Days after the arrest, thousands of aliens were still being held without formal charge, bail, assistance of a lawyer, or even the knowledge of family and friends of their whereabouts. There were even instances where visitors of the prisoners were being viewed guilty by association and arrested themselves. Those arrested were never charged with any crime. Deportation hearings were conducted by an immigration inspector in secret. The immigration inspector played as arresting officer, prosecutor, judge, jury, and recording clerk. A defense lawyer was not allowed to attend the hearings. If the individual was believed to have radical ideas or belonged to any organization that did, he or she could be deported. Due process rights did not apply to these criminal arrests. Talk of controversy surrounding the raids began to take notice of a few months after they took place. According to Constitutional Rights Foundation, a prominent group of lawyers and judges published a report documenting dozens of cases of due process violations. It concluded that there is no danger of revolution so great as that created by deliberate violations of the simple rules of American law and American decency. Assistant Secretary of Labor Louis F. Post personally assessed the records of the deportation hearings and saw not a Bolshevik menace but power unchecked by rule of law. Post overruled over 1,500 deportation orders and released nearly half of those in custody. In response to Post and the canceled deportations, Palmer demanded Post be fired for his tender solicitude for social revolution. The House of Representatives tried to impeach Post, but Post presented the violations of due process law that occurred during the raids and declared that even aliens are entitled to constitutional rights. There was never any convictions for the 1919 bombings. The only evidence of terrorism was a blueprint of what assumed to be a bomb, but was later discovered to be a record player. On May Day 1920, Palmer was once again expecting bombs and violence. State governments were prepared with militias, and New York City assembled 1,100 policemen on duty for 24 hours. The arrival of May Day came in silence, ending the Palmer raids and the Red Scare. Thank you.